Episode 71 of the Pilot to Pilot podcast takes off now.
So hi, my name is Tyson Weihs. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ForeFlight. We make apps for pilots.
Today's episode is brought to you by AOPA's Pilot Protection Services. As disciplined and meticulous pilots, we are always striving to achieve that perfect flight from engine startup to shutdown. However, even the most experienced pilot can get distracted by a passenger or have a momentary bout of information overload. AOPA's Pilot Protection Services knows that your pilot and medical certificates mean everything to you. And that's why their trusted legal services plan attorneys and medical certification specialists are there to help protect you when things don't go as planned. It's available only to AOPA members, and over 64,000 members already participate. So go check them out before your next flight at aopa.org/PPS. What is going on, AV Nation, and welcome back to the Pilot to Pilot podcast. My name is Justin Seams, and I am your host. In today's episode, I'm talking with Tyson Weihs. Tyson is the co-founder and CEO of ForeFlight, and we talk pretty much anything and everything ForeFlight. We get into the down and dirty. We talk about the beginning. We talk about how it was started, why it was started, the process of starting ForeFlight. We also talk about where they are today, the current status of ForeFlight, and then we go into the future. I asked Tyson what his ultimate goal of ForeFlight will be and how they can serve the aviation community best. Aviation, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. We're also teaming up with ForeFlight to give away 3 gift cards. Those 3 gift cards can be applied to any subscription, current or an existing subscription. All you have to do is follow ForeFlight on Instagram, follow Pilot to Pilot on Instagram, and let me know what you think of this episode. Let me know your favorite part. I'm going to be putting a post on Tuesday when I release this episode. Check out my Instagram and let me know your favorite part of the episode, and we will choose 3 winners. Aviation, if you haven't already, please leave us a review on iTunes. You can check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/Pilot to Pilot. You can also follow us on all social media platforms with the name @Pilot to Pilot. Aviation, I'm excited for this episode, excited to see what you think. So without any further ado, here's Tyson Weihs. Tyson, what is going on? Thank you for joining the Pilot to Pilot podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Lots going on.
Yeah, lots going on. All right. That's exciting. That's great. It's good news. First thing I want to say is thank you for coming on. I know you're a busy man, and I know that you got a lot to do. So I appreciate you spending an hour or 45 minutes with me to talk about aviation.
Yeah, you bet. It's a passion. So happy to.
Exactly. Right. So let's go and get started. Let's dive right in. I feel like a lot of people might know about ForeFlight. So let's start off with you. Let's start off with why you started in aviation. Kind of how old were you? What was the initial inspiration for you getting into an aviation career?
Yeah. So I sort of stumbled on it. I went to work for a company in 2000. So this is after the .com crash for those of you who are around at that period of time. But in 1998, 1999, there was this huge, run up in the stock market, and then a huge crash, and the startup scene kind of collapsed in tech anyway. And I had sold a company just before the height of the .com craze in the late 90s. And then after that came crashing down, I went to work for a company in South Carolina, a company that made benefits management software. And that's where my interest in aviation was peaked. I think, as a kid growing up in, almost anywhere in the world, you look to the sky and airplanes are fascinating. And so I think all of us have some level of fascination with airplanes and aviation. And I had that definitely since I was a young boy, starting with flight simulators in the 80s and 90s when they were much simpler than they are today. My grandfather was a bombardier on a B-24 in World War II Pacific. My dad had some flight lessons at some point and decided not to pursue it. But you just sort of, there's these touch points in your life where aviation seeds just sort of get planted. And when I worked for this company, actually in Charleston, South Carolina, it was populated by a lot of pilots. So it wasn't an aviation company, but there were a lot of pilots there. And that's what got me interested in learning to fly. And it was really my boss at the time, Ufo Mooney, took me up, on a Saturday morning for a poker run after the first week that I got to the new company. And it was really just, I was bitten by the bug, as they say, at that point. And he let me take the controls and fly it around for a little bit. And that was the beginning.
So do you think if you didn't work at this company, you would ever kind of get involved as a pilot or even get your pilot license?
Gosh, great question. Maybe not. It's conceivable that I could have worked somewhere where that would have been in the culture or in the water, if you will. Mm-hmm. But it was being in an environment where people were actively using airplanes and flying all the time that it was hard to ignore.
Yeah, for sure.
I know that before I'd worked there, I went to college in San Antonio, Texas, and I do remember going out to a flight school at San Antonio International and really just trying to walk through unnoticed, right? I was like, just going to flight school, not make eye contact with anybody, look at all the supplies in the cabinet or on the shelves there and just sort of see what was going on. And then, walked out and decided I wasn't going to do that at that point in time. But I had sort of peeked behind the curtain a little bit a couple of times, but it was really working there that made it a thing.
So what was next? What was kind of your first introduction? Was obviously that flight. You got the controls. You kind of got the bug, like you said. What was the next step to start flying and to start doing that process?
Yeah, so it went from I went up for in effect a discovery flight with him. Then we started going on trips. So we would take the Mooney or one of the partners out of Cirrus, an early Cirrus at that point in time. This is 2002, I think, really. So I went to work there in 2000, mid 2000, and I didn't start flight lessons until 2002, right? So I was a participant for a year and a half or so, and then decided, I'm going to go start flying lessons, and started with a discovery flight on a 172. Yeah. If you remember, Cessna restarted production of the 172s, I think in the late 90s. And so I went out to a flight school. They had just bought a new 172 SP. It had the latest King stack in it. It's still 6-pack and all the King radios and stuff like that. And
that's funny.
A brand new airplane smell and whatnot. And that's where I started. And for me, it was sort of start and stop. I trained for a little while, and then stopped to focus on work. And then, so that was sort of December 2002 really is when I started flight training. And I didn't end up getting my certificate until 2006. So there was a lot of start and stop along the way. I ultimately, switched flight schools because for, a lot of folks who take a while to get their private, you experience, instructor turnover. Right?
Yeah, so, for sure.
I experienced quite a bit of that. It's always a step back when you switch to a new instructor because they got to, assess you and understand where your capabilities are. And I ended up soloing in a 152. I remember that day vividly because I feel like I didn't remember much of the flying, but I remembered the stopping, and I landed the 152, and I think I had like a 25-foot ground roll, and I thought that was awesome. It was certainly longer than that, but it felt like I had good control of the airplane.
Stopped immediately.
That's right. And so soloed in a 152. Then in 2004, I went to business school, and while I was in business school, I didn't really have the money for flight training. So I did a lesson here and there. And then after I graduated, which was in 2006, that's when I had stable income again and started flight training. And I went from sort of graduating in May of 2006, and I had my license by December.
That's awesome. So I kind of find it interesting when you said that you switched flight schools and how it kind of took you a little bit of time, because I had to do the same thing. Mine was, I played sports in college, and it took me a while to kind of find the right timing between dedicating to sports, dedicating to flying. But what do you think about a student coming up that has kind of I don't know if the reason why you switched flight school is because of something you didn't like about the flight school too or what, but like someone that has an issue with a flight instructor, how important do you think it is for someone to find the right flight instructor rather than the flight school? If you know what I mean? Like if that kind of makes sense.
Good question. I don't know if, I think it's important to have a place that has some stability, right? Yeah. And so It's important to find an operation that's stable so that you've got access to aircraft. It's important to find an instructor that's going to be stable through at least, as much of your career or your initial training as possible. And it's really important to find an instructor that you click with and that is motivating and constructive in their teaching, because they're a big factor on whether you continue or not.
Yeah.
I don't remember all the reasons that I switched flight schools. One of them might have been, did it click or not? Then the other was I moved cities. I went from South Carolina to Texas, and had to find a new flight school.
That'd be hard to keep the original flight school with the move.
Yeah. But definitely instability is an issue, right? If you've got instability in the instructor or instability in the flight school, that's going to have some impact.
Yeah, I would agree.
On flight training. So it just took me a while. I mean, I started in 2002. It took me really 4 years to get to my private, which is a long duration. We've had people at ForeFlight that really focus on it, and I think the shortest we've seen, start to finish on a PPL is maybe 3 or 4 months. So,
wow, good for them.
If you've got the means and you've got the time to focus on it, and you've got the flexibility at work to get those flights in, you can move through it a bit quicker than I did.
Did you have any struggles at all other than kind of switching flight schools and that in your training? Did you find like a particular subject that was more difficult than others?
The written for me, and it's always been the case with the writtens, which is I have to spend probably what I think is maybe an exceptional amount of time focusing in on the book work, the question and answer banks and things like that. And that's one of the things that took me a while on my instrument training was getting the time to focus on the book work to get a good grade on those tests. And for me, that's just always been the area that I've struggled with the most. I think the airmanship, I haven't struggled with that as much. I think many hours in my youth playing Nintendo and video games probably helped with the hand-eye coordination.
Absolutely.
I wasn't directionally challenged. I could grasp the fundamentals of aviating well. It was always the theory and the book work for me that I note as being remarkable, and that it just took a lot of my attention and time to get all that committed memory.
For sure. And if it wasn't for Shepherd Air for me, Shepherd Air, I lived on Shepherd Air for my instrument training and for my instrument written. That thing saved my life because, like you said, it's a lot of book work. It's like a brand new language you're learning. You just learn how to fly, and then they're like, all right, well, this is what you need to do now. It's completely different.
Yeah, that was the same for me. I went through the Shepherd Air courses when I was doing my instrument. I used the sporty stuff when I'm training, these days. And I got my instrument in 2012, and I remember a substantial number of questions that were unrelated to the airplane that I flew. I got my instrument ticket. I was fortunate enough to have bought a DA-40, and I finished my instrument in the DA-40. And it seemed like 25% of the questions were irrelevant to the airplane flew or the type of flying that I was going to do. So, trying to memorize answers to questions about equipment that was no longer being manufactured, I thought was a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah, I completely agree. But here we are, and they're still the same pretty much. Right. That's cool. Yeah. No, it's what was like flying the Diamond? Did you like the Diamond?
I love the Diamond. I still have it. I bought it in 2012. We use it in flight test at ForeFlight today when we're testing products or connectivity to our Garmin avionics and that sort of stuff. I think it is one of the best first airplanes for somebody to own in aviation, whether it's outright or as a partner. But airplane's very safe, very low stall speeds. It's pretty stable on the runway, so not a lot of directional control challenges. The stall is very benign, and so I'm a big fan of it and advocate. If people are looking for a first airplane, that's a good one to get. When it comes to flying, I tend to be super conservative. And so, when looking at different models, such as, the Diamond will be a great first step for me. It's got an incredible safety record. And it was a fit.
Yeah, for sure. The only experience I have with a diamond was I was at Ohio State. I was doing my training. I was getting ready to come back to the tower. And all of a sudden, tower told me to watch out. There's a plane going, and there was a diamond that almost turned directly into me at like 2,000 feet up in the air. So I don't have any good experience with diamonds right now, but that's the only one that I have right now. So yeah, but I'm sure they're good planes.
Yeah, one thing I will say is that if you happen to live in South Texas, make sure you've got one with air conditioning.
Oh my gosh, you are not kidding. When I was building my time, I flew aerial survey, and we had a government contract to take a picture of like every single square foot of Texas. It was at 4,000 feet, and it was in the summertime, and they were in 310s, Senecas, Aztecs, Aero Commanders with no air conditioning. So we were just getting rocked and hot. It was crazy. San Antonio and Houston, where I was at most of my time.
Oh wow! Well, that's an interesting job of having to do that. I have a side interest in LiDAR and
we did LiDAR. Yeah,
that's neat.
Yeah, LiDAR was it was definitely cool. We had some huge digital cameras. Like we didn't just have a point and shoot digital camera. We had one with, I think there was 4 different lenses, and it was there's a huge hole cut out in the plane, so it was really cool.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah, it's a cool way to build your time for sure. But yeah, back to you. So we're in your what ratings do you have now? What are you up to right now?
I have obviously my private, my instrument, my multi, and I have a Citation 510 type rating.
Oh, cool! I fly a Citation Latitude right now for a fractional company, so that's awesome.
Okay, yeah, it's that's been I just obtained that rating this year. It was the first time in I guess a number of years I've gone back for a rating, and it was really refreshing getting back into sort of a learning environment and moving on to that next rating. So on my to-do list is commercial, and I'd like to get a helicopter rating.
Oh, cool. Helicopter would be sweet. That'd be awesome. So that was that Citation your first like jet type rating then?
That was my first jet type rating.
Did you have to go through flight safety?
I actually went through SimCom.
Okay.
I've got great relationships with both companies, but SimCom and Scottsdale worked out well for me time-wise, and I did it out there. And I actually broke it up into 2 sessions because just getting that much time committed or away from the office is a challenge. So I did a week of the ground school, and then had a spacer, and then finished the simulator sessions in a separate session.
Oh, nice.
And then after that, you've got to have supervised operating experience, and so that comes as the nature of flying aircraft for work.
Yeah.
And completed that earlier this year.
That's cool. So when I got my type rating last year, I got my type rating in the Latitude, and I had a bunch of questions about people asking me what the difference was from, say, like a commercial training or just your standard private pilot training. Did you feel like you're prepared for that kind of learning experience and that kind of I don't know how flight safety is. It's kind of just like you got to keep up. They're writing down a bunch of stuff and it's kind of thrown at you. Hold on to the garden hose type deal. How did you feel going into that training? Did you feel prepared?
I think I prepared probably the best I could, or along with advice of others, which is really just get familiar with the materials that you're sent ahead of time, because you get sent a stack of stuff. I mean, you get flashcards, you get study guides, you get condensed versions of the AFM that distill some of the important things in there. It's for me, it was really just more about getting oriented with the inventory that you're handed, and then go into that ready to drink from the fire hose, because it is especially your first type rating. Yeah. It is a absolute fire hose. I mean, it's every day, sort of 9 to 5 with bookwork. It's refreshing and studying the day's content in the evening. It's a lot of work on memory items.
Yeah.
And making sure you're sort of dialed in on those. But it's probably the biggest fire hose I've had to drink from in flight training in a long time.
Yeah, it's definitely that's a good analogy.
And it was very different than the rest of my training, which was I did everything at Part 61 schools, and it was less structured. So it was definitely the most structured flight training I've been introduced to.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I did my private pilot 141, then everything else 61, and then going through the latitude training, it was definitely very structured. And like you said, if you prepare for it, it's just like anything else in life. You prepare for it, you keep building up to that point, you'll be ready for that type rating. So yeah, that's pretty cool though. That's awesome.
I thought I liked the type rating. I liked going through the type rating process, and one of the most sort of remarkable aspects of that for me was all of the procedure and emergency training. Things I know some people will go and do type ratings in the airplane and then go back to school for those recurrence. And for me, it really worked well to be there and focused on that start to finish for at least the first one. But all of the emergency procedures were really eye-opening, and very glad that I had the opportunity to run through all those in the simulator. Because I tell you what, when they put the battery on EMER for the first time, and 2 out of your 3 displays go out, and you've got no flaps and you've got no gear, and you're blowing the gear and using the emergency brake handle and flying an approach by hand while running you realize that this is no joke. Yeah, no,
it is no joke, and that's why they train that, and that's why they're memory items, so you don't have to think about it. It's it's wild. And have you had any issues at all pop up when you're flying like that? Have you had any kind of emergencies or situations like that?
Nothing. Nothing. I would say exceptionally remarkable. I think in the Mustang, for example, we've had a single generator failure, and some of these were just a result of hangovers of squawks from maintenance events, but. We've had the autopilot kickoff in RVSM. We've lost, GPS over New Mexico, which impacts things. We've had pitch trim cache messages. We've what else? AHRS 1, loss of AHRS 1, reversion to AHRS 2.
Yeah,
those sorts of things. So nothing dramatic.
That's good,
but things that they require you to run the checklist and take note.
Yeah, no, definitely true. And whenever you hear that ding, your heart kind of beats a little faster, and you're a little more heightened. You're like, what's going on? What's this time?
Yeah. And the type rating training really makes those sorts of things a little less, the startle factor comes down quite a bit when you are conditioned to, count to 3, process what's happening, and then run to the checklist and run it. I mean, if it's yellow cast message, great. If it's red, you got a little more work to do.
Yeah, open that book. That's where another pilot helps out a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you typically fly at single pilot, or are you at the point where I know when I got my latitude, it was my first type rating, and I think it said I had to have 500 hours before I could fly at PIC. So I don't know what the timeline was. They said for you.
So we only fly the Mustang dual crew.
Okay.
That's one of the things after, we've put 600 hours on the airplane.
Oh, wow.
Since we fly it a lot to see customers and attend all the events that we go to. But in all of that flying, I have really become an advocate of flying with a buddy. Whether it's a safety pilot and you're flying, single pilot, IFR, or definitely when you're flying in a turbojet aircraft, my view is the safety margins go up significantly when you have a crew member with you.
Yeah,
and so that's I think sort of how I'll fly larger aircraft the rest of my career. And then even if I'm flying IFR and pistons, I'd rather have a buddy with me, and that's just what makes me the most comfortable.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I used to fly single pilot IFR in a PC-12 when I was building my time. And now that I got a dual crew, it's like, I don't want to ever go back. It's like just having all that, you're tired. Single pilot can be a lot.
Yeah. And you, at least, what's remarkable for me is how often, crew members, help spot a miss, right? Like a frequency, a radio call or a frequency change or something like that. But, it happens a lot.
Yeah, they're part of that Swiss cheese model, right? They're one of those holes, or one of the blockers that keeps it from keep going in that hole before something gets really bad.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what's kind of the goal for you in your piloting career? Are you the type of guy that wants to get as many ratings as possible, fly as many planes as possible, or do you have like a couple that you have picked out in your mind to be like, man, I would love to fly that, or I would really love to fly that?
Yeah, it's evolving, right? I mean, I want at this point something where I can do sort of doors off local flying and explore the country. As I mentioned, I'm interested in helicopter flying, and I think those, at least on the horizon, things that I'm interested in. Seaplanes as well, but I want to spend a lot of time working on or learning to fly aircraft that I think I'll end up flying a lot and enjoy. And for me right now, that is something with a tail wheel on it. I've enjoyed flying turbine aircraft for business use. And I'd really like to fly helicopters because that's just a whole different perspective and a whole different type of flying. And it's been a really awesome experience. And so I'm gravitating to those things that just really create a lot of excitement for me when I'm flying. And the other is flying is also a means for me to stay really connected to our customers' experiences. And so as we have moved into different aircraft, and my partner, a co-founder in the company, flies at TBM, we've evolved the product to support our flying needs. And we can really look back at sort of the anthropology of the application development here at ForeFlight and see a real connection to our evolution in aviation, right? So in the early days, we were VFR pilots, and so there was a lot of emphasis on, and still is, on making sure the essentials work for VFR. And then as we moved up into turbine aircraft, building more advanced flight planning capabilities, and then evolving the product to fit each of those personas, but also really support the type of flying we're doing. And helicopter is an area where I'd like us to do a bit more work on, and the best way to understand the domain is to just get right in it and experience.
I like how you said that, because I feel like there's a problem in aviation with how things are designed. They're designed for pilots, but they're not designed by pilots. So I think for the fact that you guys were the pilots and you were creating this software, I think that had a huge kind of that helped you guys out a lot, because you knew what pilots actually needed. You knew what pilots wanted. You didn't just give this software to them where it just didn't make sense for a pilot in the moment to use, but you guys actually knew what the issues were and you knew what it was and how to go ahead and kind of create that.
Yeah, really, really close to the domain. I think in software design and development in general, the closer the engineers can get to the customer or the customer experience, the more on target their software is. Yeah, for sure. And we were building it to serve our own needs, somewhat selfishly. And it turns out to be a great model.
I was going to ask you earlier, do you wish that you had what ForeFlight is now when you were doing your training? Like now you're like, dang, man, these guys have it so easy with what this is. Like, I really wish I had that. Or did you enjoy looking at the AFM, trying to find the airport that you needed?
Honestly, I think aviation is more accessible now with these tools, right? I mean, I think about my first 150 cross country, and I went from Mount Pleasant Regional Airport just outside of Charleston to an airport in Goose Creek, which is up inland. And, it wasn't a long cross country, but it was a hazy day. And the last METAR I got was at the FBO, right? And from calling flight service, and you get up in the air and there was no ADS-B weather. All you had was, AWAS, over the, or ATIS over the radio. Yeah. And it was super stressful. So I don't wish those ages on anybody.
Right.
I think even if I'm flying, I can imagine flying, tail drag or doors off, I still want to have ADS-B on the airplane because I want to know where the traffic is.
Absolutely.
But we're in for those that are thinking about, jumping into aviation, I mean, the technology now, makes it 10 to 100 times safer and easier than it was when I started in 2002. But I don't long to go back to those days. Technology is awesome, and it's saved a lot of people, and so
saves a lot of people from getting lost too and being embarrassed.
Well, I mean, lost. I mean, it's saved people who lost, electrical equipment and navigation, or attitude information. But it's made things a lot easier. So it's a great time to benefit from flying by having all this tech at your back.
Absolutely. And let's kind of get into more into ForeFlight and kind of a brief history of ForeFlight. Obviously, anyone listening to this podcast knows exactly what ForeFlight is, but I don't know if they know how deep it goes. And kind of, so we talked about how you're at the company and it kind of was an aviation influence, but what was in your mind or you and your partner's mind? Because you created it with someone else, correct?
Yeah, Jason Miller is my co-founder, and we started the company. We just celebrated our 12th birthday.
Oh, congratulations!
June 21st, 2007. We started the company.
That's crazy. What was what was it that made you want to create this? Like, I know you said it was kind of selfish reasons, but I guess a better question is, when you were creating this, did you ever expect it to be what it is today?
No, Jason and I were both working on our own software projects. He had an application he built for the desktop back in 2006. I had a couple of different websites I built for looking up aviation information. It was really just simple, like look up METARs and look up some basic airport information.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is pre-iPhone, right? I mean, 2007, the iPhone came out in June of 2007, and it's sort of no coincidence that we started the company around then. But we'd been collaborating on some projects before that. But we were just interested in writing software for aviation, and that brought us together. And it brought us together before the iPhone or the iPad was invented, right? And so, we've been writing software for the desktop and the web. And then when the iPhone came out, we were just completely awestruck by it. We went and bought one on I think it came out on a Friday, and I went to the Apple Store in the Galleria Mall in Houston and bought one. We unwrapped it and slid to unlock, which was the way that you opened it. You unlocked your phone back then, and I was just blown away by it. Yeah. And so that's really what inspired us and set the foundation for ForeFlight, was this disruptive event, which is the creation of a whole new computing platform in your hand.
What was so without the iPhone, without the iPad, obviously ForeFlight would be very different than what it was today. So what was kind of the main goal for ForeFlight before the iPad? Was it just a desktop website so you can kind of pre-flight and get all the information you need before you go?
Yeah, we thought we could build a better version of a website people used to use called AirNav. And it was, something you use to look up FBO information. And there was a really great feature on it that was buried, and it was a little distance calculator, right? And so when you're getting your PPL, you're trying to find places to fly, and you're looking for those places that are 50 nautical miles or greater, right? And so I would plug identifiers into that little tool, and it would compute the distance in a rough time. And it started with basically taking that feature and bringing it up to the top of the webpage so I could use it every time.
Yeah.
So we were trying really at that point to build a better mousetrap, and one that we thought we could design a bit differently. And had the iPhone or iPad come out, no, I mean, this would not be an enterprise. This would just be probably a second or third tier website behind the leaders, and we wouldn't be where we are today.
Yeah, it's amazing for technology, and it's kind of crazy to think about how much things can change, because in your mind, you're just creating this website, you kind of saw a need for something and you realize that, hey, I like this tool, let's create something that makes that tool more accessible. But then here comes this completely game-changing product like an iPhone or an iPad. And what was kind of the idea of an app on that iPad? Like, I mean, I forget who I was talking to, but I think I was told that you guys were one of like the first apps in the actual app store. So like, you were kind of the first ones to kind of realize the potential for this.
Yeah, we were one of the first 500 apps in the App Store when it launched in 2008. Right? And so, we didn't have a grand vision, honestly. We didn't have a business plan. We just were interested in writing some software for ourselves and interested in, really sort of interested in the experiment of seeing whether or not we could do something with this. And we started in 2007 with a website that fit on an iPhone. This is the first product that we had. Mm-hmm. And then the second major iteration of that was the native app that ran on the iPhone and was available in the App Store. And we got recognition at that point in time by being the most expensive app in the App Store. So in a world where everything was 99 cents or $4.99 or $9.99, we were a $75 one-time app, and people thought we had lost our minds.
Right.
we even had conversations with, our Apple reps at the time. We were like, hey guys, $75 for an app. Oof, that's a little rich. And, it actually helped us gain some press, and we sold a truckload of them.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, there's definitely a need for it there. And I think that's very well priced app. That's funny that you guys were the most expensive app at a time. I mean, that just kind of blows my mind, but it's just amazing how it's all changed, because now there's apps on there that are fairly expensive and you guys are nowhere near the most expensive app anymore.
Yeah. There's lots of productivity and utility apps for their, for domains that, have small markets, and, the price reflects the value ultimately delivered. And, we were fortunate. We moved away from that one-time model to a subscription so that we could sustain the product development and all the data we were buying and delivering, and the weather we were buying and delivering. And so, we switched to a subscription model in 2009. And then the real big event that transformed the company and helped us grow from really 3 people at that time to over, I guess close to 200 now, is the iPad, right? Yeah. And that came out in 2010, April 4th, 2010, actually. And Apple had invited us to port our software for the iPad, and we did that in February and March of 2010, and we're ready as the first aviation app in the iPad App Store in 2010. And in addition to just being in the App Store, the event that really transformed everything was on April 30th of 2010. Apple released an iPad that had a GPS chip in it, yes. And that's the first time you could see a blue dot on your iPad, and that was a remarkable sort of disruptive and sort of transformational pivot point for the company. And at that point, that's when our hockey stick kicked in, where we went from really truly a hobby business to we need to quit our jobs and make this a full-time endeavor.
Oh, so you had a separate job the whole time. This was kind of just a hobby for you then, in a way?
Yeah, this was a hobby business for us. We worked on it nights and weekends, because it wasn't something until that point that could really sustain full-time employment. And we didn't really know where this was heading, but when the iPad came out and we saw the quick shift in the business, we said we've got to focus on this full time. And so we all was really there were 3 owners of the business, Houghton, Jason Miller, and myself, and we said it's time to quit our jobs and do this full time.
All in or nothing, right? That's how it's got to be. That's funny. I think one thing that's interesting to think about, which I don't know if many people know, and I know I don't know, but so obviously everyone thinks about ForeFlight and think about how great it is, but was there any pushback at all when you first come up? Because when you create such a great product that really kind of changes the landscape of aviation, how training's done, I know how the FAA is, they're very old school. Was there any kind of pushback from them? Did they not want this to happen, or was it all did everyone receive it pretty well?
It depends. I mean, I think even customers in 2010, we exhibited at AirVenture for the first time in 2010 after the iPad came out, and there was a lot of doubters about whether or not an iPad would ever work in the cockpit.
Yeah.
Right? And you look at it now and you're like, that's just absurd, right? I mean, of course it works, but this is new technology. There had never, until the iPad, really been computers in the cockpit in any substantial volume, right? I mean, you had early adopters or so the technically inclined try to bring laptops into the cockpit and plug them in and read charts on them, but it just really didn't work as well in comparison, right? And the thing that the iPad did was it put a computer in every single cockpit, right? And so you went from having software on a desktop and a laptop for the hundreds of people that would try that out, to every pilot from every walk of life, pretty much brings an iPad into the cockpit now.
Oh, without a doubt. 2 of them.
2 of them. And then, you've each got a mobile phone, and so you've got an app on your phone. So that was really the transformative event, was being able to bring that in. But back to your question about, adoption or reception from the regulators, it happened in different phases. Actually, the FAA was pretty supportive of iPads, and Jeppesen was a company that beat us to this in 2010, which was the FAA, Jeppesen, and NetJets, EJM, were the first to approve iPads in the cockpit. And that was very shortly after the iPad launched. So, I've seen, aspects of the FAA be very sort of reserved in terms of how they evolve and adapt technology. And then others have been really advancing that. And the FAA right now is actually very supportive of evolving the current state of these integrated flight apps to something well beyond what it is today. And they've outlined a vision for what they'd like to see. So,
oh wow, that's cool.
I'd say it's sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, where instead of being resistant, they're actually trying to shape a vision for what it could be, which is encouraging, because then when you go to demonstrate some new capability and you want it to be used officially or operationally in the cockpit, it makes it easier to get those sorts of approvals.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the kind of just how I look at ForeFlight, how I've seen it, because I started using it right after I got my private pilot license. So I used it very heavily in my IFR training. And just to see what it is now, like how it's grown, it's been unbelievable. Like now the way I look at it, ForeFlight is almost like your own FMS in your hand. It's like your own FMS that any kind of big jet has. It's like having a Garmin 5000, but on your knee board. And it's crazy how it's grown like that.
Yeah, it's just really, really been remarkable. So there's a lot left to do capability wise. So it'll be exciting to see what comes.
What's your kind of grand vision of ForeFlight and what you would want it to be like in 20 years? If you could have everything go perfectly your way, what would you want ForeFlight to be?
I want it to be. I mean, I can boil it down to sort of a simple statement, which is, I want ForeFlight to be an essential application in the hands of every pilot, crew member, and flight operations person. So, we have a sort of a vision of supporting customers beyond the pilot. So people that support the pilot or come with the pilot. Mm-hmm. But I want ForeFlight to always be an essential aspect of the users that we support, right? And so, if I look back, 20 years from now and say, ForeFlight is still an essential part of sort of every flight for our customers, we have stayed on target.
Yeah, definitely.
Now the capabilities and the things that we'll do will evolve. Some of that's driven by what new technology appears and, what ideas we have. But one thing that's been constant over the past decade is new technology continues to appear that we can leverage, mm-hmm. right? And so, we will continue to do that because we have a really curious appetite for what's next. But that's really the essence is I want ForeFlight to be an essential part of every pilot's everyday life.
Cool. I like that. And I got about 2 more questions before I get in the rapid fire section. But so obviously I asked if you didn't go work for that one company down in South Carolina, would you have been able to become a pilot? But take it even farther, if you want to become a pilot and if you didn't work for that company, do you think you would have even had the time to create ForeFlight?
Oh gosh. I think that, it's sort of like the time machine paradox, right? Which is you go back in time and you alter one thing and, you alter history. I mean, everything I would say lined up just right for this to exist. I'm not sure if ForeFlight would exist if I had been born 5 years earlier or later.
Right.
I mean, so, being born in the, I guess, is dating myself in the late 70s and having grown up on an Apple IIe computer and fallen in love with programming at a young age and, having grown up in an entrepreneurial family and a creative family, those are all things that just lined up perfectly for this to get created. And then that combined with discovering aviation, by sort of randomly being at a company that embraced aviation and used it, all that stuff contributed. And had any one of those things turned out differently, ForeFlight may not exist. Right? I mean, had I not met my wife, on the elevator of the dorm we were moving into on the first day that we got there, she's been a big part of our success as well. And so
that's amazing.
You adjust any one of those factors and, there would be an app probably. It may not be us.
Yeah, that's funny. It's funny that you talk about your wife, because the only reason I started this podcast was because of my wife too, because I had so much off time when I was flying freight and I was just playing video games. She's like, you need to do something more productive. It's like, start a podcast. I was like, okay. And here we are. So yeah, it's amazing having a great woman or a great supporter back at home. Yeah. It's they know more than we do. They're smarter than us.
For sure.
Well, cool. Well, one of my last questions is so obviously you guys have changed a lot, or you've made a lot of changes to the app. Is that mostly kind of homegrown changes? Is that stuff that you guys always had an idea of, or is it kind of you get customer feedback? Like, man, that's a really good idea. Let's try to incorporate that.
It's a mix of everything. I mean, we certainly have a lot of organic idea generation that comes from the team, which spread out across multiple continents and cities and exposed to different aspects of aviation. So there's way more idea production than we could ever build.
Right.
So that's a mix. I would say Jason and I we manufacture a lot of ideas, but the team just comes up with a tremendous number, and then very close, sort of constant interaction with customers, right? Because you need to. I say this, to our team is you need to be in a place to follow the scent, and where you pick up on those scents are being with customers, right? Which is understanding sort of what their needs are and their challenges and where they want to be, and then incorporating sort of their ideas and vision into the product. And so, in every one of our teams now, there is very close connection to customers, and there's a handful that they'll work with very closely to help shape any aspect of the product. But ideas come from anywhere. They come from our sales team collaborating with engineers at our hack weeks, for example, where different people in the organization have gotten together to try to solve a problem or build software to support a use case. Yeah. So ideas come from anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. And you never know who's going to give you the next $1 million idea, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, and we've got plenty of those.
Yeah, which is good. That's a good problem to have. And I lied. I do have one more question. I think this is kind of interesting. It's so obviously ForeFlight has a lot of features like I've been talking about. What is there one that you thought was going to be more of a game changer than it actually was? Because when you create something, it's kind of like, oh, this is my baby, but maybe it wasn't received as well. Was there one feature that you guys created that you thought was going to take off more than it did, or necessarily didn't get as much attention as it should have?
There are some. I would say it's probably easier to point to sort of the really transformative events that have happened, and one of those is ADS-B.
Yeah,
that was something. Honestly, we weren't the earliest in embracing that, and boy, are we thankful we did. Mm-hmm. And another one of those was, geo-referenced approach and taxi plates.
Yeah.
Taxi divers. We weren't the first to do that. We're really glad we sort of embraced those things. We're fortunate to have been able to work on connected cockpit stuff with partners like Garmin. So we've been involved in those sorts of efforts over the years. But there have been some very key events like that over time that, had we not been aggressive in adopting and embracing, we would have been in not in a first place position.
Right. For sure. No, that's a good way to put it. All right. I have a rapid fire section for you. It's all aviation based, and you just say the first thing that comes to your mind, and they're not hard. It's very simple questions, but you just got to say it as fast as possible. And the first thing comes to your mind. You ready?
Got it.
All right. Let's see here. Let me get where I'm going. All right. What is your favorite airplane you've ever flown?
The favorite airplane I've ever flown is a Citation Mustang.
What's your dream airplane to fly? And let's do like a general aviation dream airplane.
P-36 Lightning.
What about a dream commercial? If you're a commercial airline pilot and you wanted to fly any pilot, what would it be? Or any plane, what would it be?
Oh, probably a Dreamliner.
Oh, good answer. Good answer. All right. What is one of your favorite flights you've ever had? So let's say, what's your favorite airport you've ever landed at?
Aspen.
Least favorite airport?
Aspen.
I 100% agree with everything you just said there. That's a good one. All right. So you are on an airline flight. You didn't get a chance to take the Mustang, so you got to fly commercial. You're connecting through whatever city, doesn't matter. You're really hungry. You need to get some food. What's your go-to airport food that you always want to eat?
Hot dog.
Okay, there you go. All right, here's one. What is your favorite ForeFlight feature?
ADS-B weather.
What is something you wish you would have known before you became a pilot?
That it's not as easy as it's always made out to be.
That's a good one. For training purposes, Cessna, Piper, or Diamond?
Cessna.
Would you rather fly long legs or a bunch of short legs?
Short legs.
Let's see. What's one of your favorite cities to have an overnight in?
Portland, Maine.
Ooh. All right. Who in the industry would you like to meet most?
I'm trying to pick people that I haven't met.
or who is one of your most influential mentors or anyone that you were able to meet?
Bob Hoover.
Oh, man, making me jealous. That's crazy. That's so cool. That's about it. Those are about all the ones I have, all the ones I wrote down. So you survived. Congratulations, Tyson. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun talking with you and just having you on and hearing more about your story and who you are as a pilot and an aviator and talking a little about ForeFlight. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Hey, take care.
No problem. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And that is a wrap of episode number 71 of the Pilot to Pilot podcast. Aviation, do not forget you have the opportunity to win one of 3 gift cards from ForeFlight. Those gift cards can be added to an existing or a new ForeFlight account, so you do not want to miss out on this. All you have to do is comment on my latest post about this podcast. Let me know your favorite part of the podcast, and you are automatically entered to win one of 3 gift cards. Aviation, I don't want to keep any longer. I appreciate you listening to today's episode. And as always, happy flying.